With Union Arena Regionals right around the corner, the meta is really starting to heat up. And even more so because we get two big set releases this week that are going to once again shake up the meta. So whether you're a new player who's just diving in with Union Arena because you're really excited for Black Clover, or you're an experienced or returning player who just wants a good starting point, then this is the video for you. I'm going to give you 6 different lists to get started with and also provide a ranking at the end of which ones I think are going to be the best, which you'll either want to pick up for testing reasons or go win your local rare battle with. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, first and foremost, we do got to talk about the elephant in the room, is that there was a card removed from this set. Did it need to be removed? Not really. Does it make sense to why it was removed? Also, not really. The power level wasn't too crazy. But also, does the deck really care about this card being removed? Not really. So again, all accounts considered around this, I don't know why this card was removed, but we are missing the 3-cost double energy Asta, which can be a raid fodder and can become a 4K attacker, but we have enough in this deck already that we're not missing it too much. It's not like the Rukia fodder that we missed in Bleach Volume 1 that did hurt the raid line that we could really string together. There's enough Astas in this deck that you really don't miss it too much, and there's other 4K attackers that we can really rely on, so it doesn't have that big of an impact in terms of the set's overall power level or depowering the raid side of it. So again, this one does leave me a little bit of a mystery, but you're not missing a lot for its absence in this case. But with that out of the way, let's dive into that exact list, which is going to be probably the deck list that most people start with and are really excited to play, is the Red Asta list. Now, this is just red good stuff at the end of the day. If you've been playing Union Arena for a while, you know how common it is that we're looking for decks that either have extra removal by either sidelining a character. In this case, we do have it with the 5-cost Asta interacting with your opponent's board, or you're just looking for something to bounce it back to their hand or rest it, like yellow is very key to doing. So for those that are newer to Union Arena, a lot of times we will have raid characters that have some kind of extra removal baked into them, traditionally around the 4,000 BP threshold mark, so you're hitting your opponent's raid characters as well, and that is exactly what the 5-cost Asta is doing here. You're able to play this as a key threat, remove something from your opponent's side, and get in an extra point of damage. Now, the one thing to note about this deck in particular, it is very heavily reliant on this tucking a card underneath face down mechanic, and we can only get that reliably through a couple of cards, be it the 2 energy Libe, I believe how you pronounce it, and also the 4-cost Noct Faust, which tucks a card. So without those, Asta does depower himself, as we see with the 5-cost version, and you have to strip the top of the raid source. Now, in some niche scenarios, this is actually kind of good because our hand can get clumped together with a bunch of raid targets, and it does allow us to then play this same Asta again and get another removal effect. However, you do need to be mindful about how many 4K attackers we ultimately have, right? That was a piece I was talking about just a moment ago with the 3-cost Asta and being able to go up to a 4K BP threshold for when you're trying to be aggressive. That's like the key number to hit in Union Arena. However, we have some other raid targets that are perfectly fine that we're happy to raid with, as well as just the key card we talked about of giving us another 4K attacker that also draws a card by himself. So it does streamline together quite well, and there are enough other 4K bodies that you don't really miss, again, that 3-cost Asta we were talking about. And the Mimosa here does give us a great value as well in just being able to draw a card. Now, there are some other variants you can do with some of the other event cards to get the other half of this card kind of online, but it's honestly not really needed. This is just all about streamlining your deck, getting some extra card draw effects to then hopefully find and chain together your various Asta and the various raid effects, right? Either being lining up for the impact or ultimately, again, just being the extra removal. So from a overall Union Arena deck list, this is kind of the generic good stuff, as I said earlier on, that you really like to see. Extra removal, extra pieces of draw that we can rely on. We have other ways to filter for cards. And of course, in my opinion, just the best special to have is the named character 5K removal. So we have seen some of the other specials in this set that have some additional gimmicks, or they don't work as straight removal and you have to either block with something, right? Those are strictly worse because they require a little bit more to them. But with this deck, we have more than enough Asta to ever have to worry about, so we're able to consistently get that 5K, removal. So while this isn't the most exciting deck to play in Union Arena just in terms of like unique mechanics and other stuff that they're doing, it is still a very high-powered, consistent deck that it gives you removal turn after turn that makes this a powerhouse in the current meta. Now, again, these are all going to be starter lists. I definitely recommend tinkering with this a little bit, but from an overall recommendation, I think this is definitely going to be the best deck of this set. And again, it is just straightforward at the end of the day and a powerful deck. Moving on from there to be a little bit more creative for what it wants to be doing, we have the Noelle Silva deck, which is all about event cards mattering. So your spells or other effects, right? For those that are maybe newer to Union Arena, we have something called event cards, which are going to be the specials or the final trigger, which is the action point restander. But in this case, we also have the all-knowing priestess, which is just another event card that you can run to help you get up to that threshold. So again, ultimately, this deck wants to get to the point of 4 or more event cards. You're going to get the extra, impact for using in the turn. You're going to go up to 5,000 BP, which is really important against a lot of green decks that have that 5,000 BP staple. And then also, if you have the right amount, this all lines up to having Noelle also be a removal body. If you have 4 or more, your opponent must block this card. So they're blocking the card. Generally, if you get an event played that turn, it goes up to 5k. You're getting the impact. This is slowly chipping away at your opponent's board turn after turn as long as you're streamlining this together. One of the downsides of this deck compared to the one that we just talked about is that you are having to line up very specific things to get the most value out of some of these 4k attackers, or you're just trying to save them for like a nullify impact. But again, once you get up to that threshold of having 4 events in your sideline, the deck really comes together. Then you're able to get these 4k bodies really start to be aggressive and chipping away at your opponent's life total. Other than that, it is just a lot of extra filtering and drawing. So one big thing about this deck is that you really need to find those final trigger cards. In this case, my magic is never giving up. We'll all just call those the action point restanders to really extend out your turn, right? You have a bunch of cards can either help you draw ones. Unfortunately, you can't loop back the final like the Esper Sisters deck can in One Punch Man, but we are able to get the extra filtering and find the key pieces to eventually lead into this big payoff. Now, unfortunately, it is a little bit weaker in your early game setup. We don't have a double blocker we can rely on. We don't have as many active triggers compared to some of the other decks. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the red color trigger is the worst color trigger in the game. So that's not really that great as a defensive pick at the end of the day. Now, the color trigger in this case is a 1-cost Noelle that we're running anyways, so we're happy to see at least getting a slight extra benefit from it. But ultimately, because of those things, we are missing a little bit of the more defensive side that this does require a little bit of things to go your way. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit different and requires a certain comboing and to really get that payoff at the end, this is a deck for you, and one that calls back to the pizza deck, if you will, from the Red Code Geass that has kind of that same feel to it of getting a certain number of cards in your sideline to really get that payoff. Up next, we go into the green decks with Yuno, and this one is just, when I first saw Black Clover and I was watching videos on YouTube, this deck is insane if you pull it all off, right? So the key gimmick of this deck, and traditionally in green, we either see very low to the ground aggressive strategies, or we see very high energy cost late game threats, right? And so this is going to be the former, where you set up a board that relies on Yuno to really get the extra value, play some stuff for free, and you are suddenly just promoting your entire energy line up forward for this one really big explosive turn. And because everything is at a lower energy cost, you're able to get your board established a lot quicker. And you are hoping to high heavens that Yuno can find you the extra 3-cost cards to rebuild some of your energy line. Now, in this case, we are also playing the Clover Kingdom because it does give us a 5k boost. And we are able to, refill our energy line off of that, where we're trying to do Asta to get like the extra draws, get the extra impact that are always going to want to be on the front line. So in this deck in particular, for the way that it plays out, your energy line does get a little bit difficult to reestablish, to where often you're taking an entire turn off to build that back up. However, the explosive nature of this deck can give you a huge lead early on, that as long as your opponent doesn't hit a special or an active trigger on maybe a double blocker, you can chip away their life total very, very quickly. And if the Yuno goes unanswered, it is going to be able to be a key refiller to get your energy line back up and apply constant pressure turn after turn after turn. Now, the thing I will note here is that you do have to keep your entire deck at 3 energy or less. And unfortunately, you'll find from time to time is that Yuno is going to be able to see himself on top. You're going to cry a little bit and not get that extra effect. So everything else in this deck is going to meet that criteria that we need, but ultimately this is one that you have to streamline just together in the right way together, or you'll have to find a brick for a turn that can cost you the game from time to time. But if you are looking for a ultimately explosive style of deck that also does have a engine built into it that can help reset your energy line, then this is absolutely the deck for you. Going on to the other half of the green theme, as it were, is the big, powerful late game green boss monsters. In this case, we have Mereoleona, I believe is how you pronounce that, right? Vermilion. And this card by itself is quite a beast of a, boss card, if you will. Has the impact, has damage to no matter what, your opponent is going to be losing some stuff on this card. But then also it has a very interesting activate main condition where once per turn you can switch a character to active and it gains 1000 BP. This is amazing for being able to give cards pseudo haste so that traditionally as a green deck, as a late game green deck, you're going to be behind a little bit on your board, and this allows you to play something as a blocker, but then also suddenly be able to attack with it on that turn, and especially with some of the other decks in the meta, being able to boost up some of your 4K attackers into 5K is going to be extremely relevant. However, in this deck in particular, we have the one searcher, which is great for the raid filter as well, but it doesn't have as much draw as we might like, and we're also missing a key double blocker that we would have liked to have seen with the active trigger. So it doesn't have as much of that defensive build that we like to see for late game green decks, or it doesn't have that, targeted snipe that we'd like to see for some of the other ones. And then also on that same note, as we talked about some of the other specials that we see within this set, this one, the Dark Cloak Dimension / Equinox, is very reliant on what your board is going to be. And in these type of green decks, it can be a little bit to get our 4Ks on board. So if your opponent is able to get that very early aggression and you're not able to hit that 4K yet because you're building up your boards with 25s and 3Ks to play on your next turn, losing out on that tempo can be problematic at times. But again, for a deck that wants to be more of a late game powerhouse, this is where we see Vermilion come online, get the extra activation with being able to untap something and attack. But this is a deck that is going to require a little bit more setup before it can truly shine, and it can be, unfortunately, a turn or two slower than what you would really hope for it to be. However, I think this is a really cool, boss card design that does a lot for the deck that we just haven't seen just quite yet in green, but it does need a little bit more of a support system behind it with the, better double energy, better color trigger targets that we can rely on, things of that nature. So I think this is something that just needs a piece or two to really make it shine. But if you like those more late game powerhouse style of decks, then this is definitely the one that you should gravitate towards. Now, in Union Arena, time and time again, we have seen these tribal style of decks. In this case, it is going to be the Black Bulls affinity cards. We've seen the 13 court guards out of Bleach, and we've seen other decks in Union Arena that follow that kind of pattern. And in this case, we have yet another one with the Black Bulls, as I mentioned, with Asta and Yami. That is interesting because it does care about the Black Bulls affinity cards. However, this one plays a little bit differently, like we've seen in the past, where you have cards that get extra advantage while you're being able to play them, like a raid card that lets you find another one. This is all about setting up your sideline for additional value and then getting cards back from your sideline. And what's really interesting about this one is actually the Black Bulls Hideout, which in purple combos together quite well with your color triggers. So early on, you can play this site, discard a 2 or less card that you're going to want to get back with a color trigger anyways, and then get that extra value by being able to replay it towards your board and then getting an extra block if you need it. So this is really great. That can help be an early game enabler if you want to just get a extra block for some reason, or it's something that can set up for a card that you want to pitch back or pitch now and get back later because you have other cards. Again, the Vanessa being the important one here allows you to get extra value out of them. So there's a lot of ways or a lot of cards that we're playing out of our sideline, and then additional ways to get them back. But at the end of the day, we are trying to build up our board with the Black Bulls to get some additional effects. And in this case, it really is just about the Asta being able to get the impact, and then really nice that the other character loses nullify impact for the duration of this battle. So no matter what, you're able to line up this Asta to get in that point of damage, unless they have like a 5k blocker, in which case you can remove it if you need to, right? Then you are able to get through that last point of damage guaranteed with this Asta, which is really interesting at the end of the day. And what I really like too is that with the Yami, that when attacking, you get to choose one character on your field with the Black Bulls and power it up as well. So even if they have that 5k, you make your 4k swing with Yami, power up your Asta to get to that 5k that way, and then clear through for the point of damage. So this one does line up quite well where you want multiple cards that kind of chain together, but ultimately it is all about that sideline filtering, getting some extra draw. Again, Black Bull's Hideout getting a energy and also draw 2 is just great value at churning through your deck a lot quicker. And then otherwise, we're just looking at the triggers again, so we don't have a double block, but we do have some extra draw cards. So you're just, again, increasing that consistency of when you're seeing your cards you want to. So this is one that I would have liked to maybe find more of a hybrid version, which I haven't talked about in this video yet, but it's generally when you smush two archetypes together and just take the best cards out of them. But for the sake of this video, I always like to just do the purest builds of each of these decks. So that's where we see this Black Bulls really coming together. And also because of how this deck operates, you do need a high number of Black Bulls at the end of the day. So you do have to keep in mind that we need to make sure that we're hitting that threshold to get the most powerful effects. But if you are a card gamer from other Bandai games and you like more purple decks that play out of your sideline or, the trash or discard, depending on what you call it from other games, and to get extra value and still find these aggressive lines, then this is definitely going to be an interesting deck for you to pick up. And then last but not least, which I love to call Oops, I Win, and I normally showcase the key raid target, right, as we're talking about these decks, which in this case, it would be Dante just for the extra draw and filtering. But we finally got an alternate win condition in Union Arena. And this deck is all about stalling out the game and drawing out your deck so you can go, at the end of my turn, I have no cards left. Oopsies. I just win the game. Does not matter what my life total is. Does not matter what your life total is. I win. I get there. However, the thing I will say is that if you've played Union Arena in the past, this can be quite difficult to get to this very specific condition. You need a lot of extra cards to draw through, as we have seen with the Nanami deck in the past, which cares about going down to 15 cards. It can be quite difficult to get there, and that is with the extra draw. That is with the Sukuna's Fingers. That's with the Color Nanami that lets you draw 3 cards, right? That's with all the extra draw triggers if you hit them out of life. So getting that last 15 cards is going to be quite difficult. However, this deck side by side does have extra ways to draw those extra cards, as well as cards that can help nullify impact to make sure that you get that extra turn or two that you need to really go the distance. So this deck is all about filling up your sideline, getting to use those cards to your removal area or exile for some additional effects, but ultimately just trying to find those key cards. As I mentioned, Dante, cycling through, drawing a bunch of extra cards when you need them, or discarding them as it goes through the deck, right? Either drawing or discarding, really just trying to thin out your deck as much as possible, get it down to 0, and then have this sight card, which again, this card is just going to sit on your energy line. Your opponent's not going to be able to interact with it. So it's just that looming doom, in the back row that they have to deal with. But if you get there, if you get all the way through your deck and you're able to survive somehow, then you get to live and say, oops, I win. I get this match through this alternate win condition. Now, to be fair, there are enough 4K attackers that there will be some games that you just go, well, I guess I'm just attacking and lined up and I win that way, right? So don't always think of this deck, or only think of this deck as I have to get down to 0 cards or I'm never going to win. It's not entirely true. You are able to push through some damage surprisingly well, depending on how the game has gone. But keep in mind that one of your key paths to victory, because of how this deck wants to operate and all the extra draw and all the extra discarding, is going to be off the back of the Tree of Qliphoth, as I believe how you pronounce that, the alternate win condition. So again, really cool to see at the end of the day that we're getting more things like this in Union Arena, even if they are a bit difficult to achieve. But, that's how they should be. Alternate win conditions should not be something you can just consistently get every single game. So I was very happy to see this. And last but not least, we're going to give our prediction or just talk about this. And you'll notice that I did change this from the last video, and I still have to record my Bleach Volume 2, but I went ahead and just combined these both at the same time just so people could have the full list. And then also, I'm not going to talk about Bleach too much in this video, but I'll save that for the next video, instead talking about Black Clover and where it fits overall. So first and foremost, you'll notice that I changed these categories because I think too many people get stuck on if it can't win, if it's not the absolute best deck, that it will always, 9-0 or regional, I don't care about, I'm never going to play it. And that's just not the right way to think about Union Arena. There are definitely a lot of decks that have just that one extra consistency card over the other at the end of the day, but they're very close overall when you look at the field, think about the overall matchups, that in my opinion, there is easily going to be 12 plus decks that we could see topping and then potentially winning a regional as well. But for me personally, the way I broke this out now is just from a overall easy picks. This just means high consistency, very good at what they want to be doing, just ultimately something that's going to give you a very actionable game plan turn after turn after turn that also has a power level worthy of being at the top. And then the one just below that is everything the same, but it might be either pilot dependent, it might be something that you have to really know the ins and outs of, but it rewards you for getting the reps in with the deck and being very, very explosive. And that's where you'll see the red Black Clover list, making it to the top here as kind of the standout deck. The one below that has good days. You need a couple things to go your way, but ultimately there's still a very good deck. The one thing I will note here is that I'm adding Toshiro back for this tier list because I think it is absolutely insane in a switch-heavy meta that the Toshiro freeze is like a sleeper counter pick to the meta currently. And then for Speed of Sound Sonic, obviously this is a deck that I've talked about a lot on this channel. I really like it, but at the end of the day, if you run into the yellow Saitama deck, it's going to feel pretty bad. However, as we're getting more decks into the format, you're less likely to see that really bad matchup. And in that case, the Sonic can really run away with it. Heart of the cards, look, you need stuff to go your way. That's exactly why we put the purple Oops, I Win Black Clover list in this category, because oftentimes, if the game goes long enough, you are going to be able to win through your alternate win condition more readily based on it being a slower and more control-heavy meta. So that's where if you get the time to extend out, if everything goes well, you are going to win the match. Same thing with the Yuno Highroll deck, as I like to call it. Look, it is super explosive if you get that early aggressive play out, but if your opponent hits a special and he just kills your Yuno on the spot, that's going to feel really bad. If you whiff on your Yuno, that's going to feel really bad as well and just be a gut feeling I did my big explosive turn and now I'm just going to lose the game over the next 2 turns. There's not much I can do about it, right? And then here for a good time, you love these decks. They are fun to play. They might be missing a lot of consistency pieces. They might not have the right BP thresholds in their decks for the removal that we can run, or they just might be not having enough triggers in them, being extra draw, being extra activates for your double blockers. And unfortunately, that is where, in my opinion, a lot of the other Black Clover decks are going to fall. In general, this set is very focused around the red deck, which is very good. And unfortunately, a lot of the other ones do fall off quite hard. As I was kind of talking about throughout the video, they are just missing 1 or 2 key pieces that really chunk them down from an overall power level perspective. And even though it got a card cut from it, yes, I still strongly believe that the Red Asta deck is still one that is going to take over the meta and be a very key player, as well as being able to contend with the other top dogs. Now, the one thing I will mention about Bleach in this video that I'll talk about a lot more in the next video is that I always try to give this spotlight on the left here in terms of what deck I think people will gravitate towards or buy into now so that they can play it later when it gets Volume 2 support and it gets that last couple pieces it needs. And this is really a toss-up between the super consistent, does what it wants to do, but does the same thing every single game of Squad Zero versus the super toolboxy, you build it however you want, blue Bleach deck. So I think as we start to see the regionals come to life and we start to see the meta really develop, I think we will see more people leaning towards blue Bleach because it heavily rewards the pilot for both how you're playing the match as well as the every single card matters that you're putting into your deck because there's so many different ways that you can build it. So I'm very curious to see who can kind of crack the code with Blue Bleach and really take it to a high performance finish. So with that, that is our Black Clover all-in-one deck list video. Again, a set that has a lot of really fun pieces to it, but from a purely competitive standpoint, I think we will only really see the Red Asta deck kind of take the lead. But which deck are you most excited for out of this set? Definitely let me know in the comments below. And if you're looking forward to the Bleach Volume 2 roundup video of this same style, it will be out later this week, so please remember to like and subscribe for future Union Arena content. But until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.